You're listening to Let's Talk Creation with Todd Wood and Paul Garner, the creation show where we learn, grow, and worship.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Let's Talk Creation with Paul Garner and Todd Wood. I'm Paul Garner.
And I'm Todd Wood.
And I hope that you've been enjoying our recent episodes. Do remember to subscribe, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so that you get notified of all of our new content. Do like and share our episodes and tell your friends about us. All of that is very welcome. And you're particularly welcome if you're a new viewer or listener. We're very glad to have you, and we hope you'll stick around. We have today a very special episode. Earlier this year, for those of you who are regular listeners, you will remember that we talked to my colleague, Dr. Stephen Lloyd in Biblical Creation Trust, all about the Cambridge House Initiative. And if you haven't seen that episode, go back and check it out. It's a very exciting project that's going on there in Cambridge. And then we also talked in another episode to Dr. Joel Brown, who is the new director of the Creation Research Society's Van Andel Creation Research Center in Phoenix, Arizona. And we talked to him all about his work and the work of the Creation Research Society. Again, a great episode. If you haven't watched it, do go back and check that out. That was a really fascinating conversation we had with Joel. But then after those episodes came out, Todd, I think it was your wife, wasn't it, who had a word in your ear and said, you need to do an episode about Core Academy of Science. Is that right?
Yes, that is exactly how it happened. She works on our show notes for us, and she's working on those show notes for those episodes. And she just looks at me and says, "How come there's no Core Academy episode?" And I said, It never occurred to me that would be worth an episode. But I guess, now that you mention it, I guess Cambridge House is worth an episode, and the CRS Van Andel Center is worth an episode. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess we're worth an episode too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good on her for kind of, poking us in the ribs and saying, what are you doing? Get on with it. So, we've always treated, haven't we, Let's Talk Creation as a kind of vehicle to help people understand creationists, but also creationism generally. We like to have on experts, specialists, particularly those who are outside of the mainstream, people that maybe don't get the big public spotlight, but are doing really interesting things in creationism. And I suppose, like you, I didn't really think of the regular work of my organization, Biblical Creation Trust, as the theme of a whole episode until we sort of did the Cambridge House project. And then that did seem like a good thing to talk about and tell people about.
Yeah.
I think your wife is right. I think, talking about our ministries is a legitimate thing for us to do for an episode or two. We probably won't do it very often.
No.
But I think explaining exactly, what we are, who we are, what we're about, is important for people to understand. And so we've done Cambridge House. We talked about Biblical Creation Trust and our sort of big vision for the future, our project to take over the world.
That's right.
So now you're in the hot seat. So tell us about Core Academy of Science. Where should we begin?
So first I'll just say to everyone who's ever asked me that question, I'm sorry that I launch into some weird theological motivation speech, but this is how my brain works. My brain is more interested in setting out the why and the how than it is in explaining the what and the sort of nuts and bolts. So that's where we're going to begin. What are the motivations for having a Core Academy of Science? What sent me down this road? And there are several motivations, as you might imagine. One is never enough for me. I need more reasons than that. So one desire I had early on was to work with students on creation research projects. And that may seem that may seem a little too simple to people, because surely that happens, right? And the answer is not necessarily. I did my schooling in the 90s. Basically, the entire decade of the 90s I spent in college and in grad school. And even though I went to a Christian university, there wasn't really, I participated in some ecology research. There wasn't really sort of an organized effort to do creation research. And I don't mean that as a knock to my professors or to any of the other professors in this country. There's lots of Christian colleges that have science departments, and many of them have very dedicated faculty who are teaching those science classes, and they're doing a great job of it. And some of them have overloads, and they have a full-time job. If they're going to do research, they're probably going to do research on what they did as grad students, sort of, to continue the work that they're already familiar with. So yeah, of course, there's not going to be a lot of extra brain energy for doing some really out of the box kind of creation work. So it makes sense to me that wouldn't happen. But I felt like that needed to sort of change, right? And I think part of a problem that I see in creationism, and I really didn't appreciate it, I think, until I got out of grad school, was that we tend to, as I say, reinvent the wheel generationally. And I don't mean that we don't make progress, because I think we clearly make progress. But a lot of times these concepts enter creationism, and they exist as a kind of folklore by their own power, however that is. And they don't get extended, they don't get applied, they don't get expanded, they just get repeated. So I think a good example of this is that episode we just did on created kinds in the After the Flood series.
Yeah.
And in that episode, I think anybody who's familiar even passingly with creationism and what we think about creation has heard of created kinds. Some of them might even know about hybridization and so forth. But for someone to go deep into it like what we did there, I think that was maybe unfamiliar. Maybe it was a little unsettling to some people. That's some pretty crazy stuff. But I think, as we sort of talk through it, it's just sort of a consequence of what the implications are of that idea. And I remember when I got out of grad school, I picked up a copy of Frank Marsh's Evolution, Creation, and Science, which was a book that was published in 1942 originally. So I had that book and I read it, and I was just shocked at it. Shocked in a good way, because I felt like, here's a good roadmap for creationist biology, but also shocked in a bad way, because I felt like we're still arguing about these questions. It feels like we haven't made a lot of progress. And so I felt like what we needed in creationism was sort of a more intentional effort to move things along, to sort of pass along creationist ideas generationally, so the next generation didn't just absorb it from the zeitgeist or the internet or YouTube or whatever, but that they could receive these ideas, know where they came from, know how far they've been pushed, and then be able to carry on to the next step, to the next project that needs to be done. And I felt like that was going to help us all in the long term, more than just another creationist organization that, writes little articles for the lay public and makes podcasts, or whatever, right? There's plenty of organizations that do that. That's great. But I wanted to do something more intentionally, training up new creationists. So that was one of my motivations, to be intentionally generational. Another idea regarding sort of this idea of being intentionally generational, as I was growing up, I grew up in a time, at least in America, I don't know how much this would apply to British creationists, but in America, I was watching, and I should say, Christians broadly speaking, not just creationists. But I could name a lot of great Christian organizations that were really very closely tied to particular people. So I went to Liberty University, right? Tied inextricably to the founder, Jerry Falwell, right? It was Jerry Falwell School. You had names like Larry Burkett, who gave us advice about how to manage our money. You had James Dobson talking about focus on the family. You had Johnny Erickson Tada. And all of these individuals at these organizations. And I don't mean to knock that, because that's sort of an inevitable kind of a thing. But I always watched as the end of those people's ministries came, and the ministries sort of had to, in a sense, reinvent itself or reimagine what it looks like without the presence of the founder, who is so essential to that organization. And I started thinking, we can avoid some of that crisis if we start more intentionally training up new leaders who are deliberately going to be the next generation of leadership. And we need to start early. And I've been talking for years about how I can't wait to retire and hand it off to somebody else. And it gets a laugh, but I'm kind of serious about that. I think that, it's not, I don't think it's a good idea for us to just hang on as our faculties are failing and our memories are failing, and to just sort of hold on to the bitter end. I think it's better for us to plan early that our lives are limited, our time here and our work here is limited, and we need to think about who's going to carry the torch as we move on.
Yeah, I've always said that right from the beginning of the Biblical Creation Trust. I've always said that one of my tasks is to make myself redundant, is to train someone who can do it better than I can and can take over from me. And I don't know to what extent we've been successful, but I mean that's always in the back of my mind.
Right? Yeah, it is. Yeah,
I want to make myself superfluous.
Yes, that's exactly right. I want to be able to retire and move away to a quiet little house somewhere and not have to worry about all this stuff, and know that it's in good hands, and God is taking care of things, and there are decent people carrying the torch. And then the next motive, I'd say, so the first motive was I wanted to intentionally pass along the wisdom and ideas of creationism. The second motive, I wanted to pass on the leadership. And the third motive, I think, is just the subject itself. I just feel like creation itself, the idea about creation, is just a terribly important concept, in part because evolution is a kind of massive stumbling block to a lot of people, right? And sometimes that stumbling block is easy for people to step over with just a few little nudges to remind them, well, maybe that's true, maybe it's not true, maybe your particular hang-up is not really that much of a hang-up after all, and so they can go around it or over it or whatever. But a lot of people have really deep questions that aren't easy to resolve. And it's not a matter of just saying, well, go read this little article or watch this little YouTube video. It takes some sustained work to sort of resolve these questions. And then, of course, the Christian story itself of creation, fall, redemption, and glorification starts with creation, right? God made everything. He made us. That's why he has a claim on us, why he can decide whether we're right with him or not. We fell into sin. We decided to rebel against him. God made a way to redeem us through Jesus Christ and his sacrifice. And then one day Jesus will come back to reclaim us, and we will be freed from the power and presence of sin forever. And we will be with God in a sense, the way, culminating in the way he had intended all along, the goal that he was moving creation towards. Yeah. So it may not be that, Jesus is, Jesus' death and resurrection. That's the gospel. That's sort of the heart of the gospel message. But creation is a really important bit of Christian theology. And if we sort of change that, that seems to be kind of important. And the church ought to be thinking about these kinds of questions. And I want to say here, before I go on, a lot of people sort of hear me and my passion for creation, and they think that I'm sort of bashing their attempts to discredit evolution. And that's a really complicated question. I think certain arguments are pretty bad and we should stop using them. But guess what? So does Answers in Genesis. So does Creation Ministries International. We all have these arguments that we really wish creationists would stop repeating because they're terrible. But I also think, sort of at the end of the day, the church has really flourished a lot in the past because of responding to error. So sometimes, in the early church, it was just these weird heresies that people had, heretical ideas that people had, and they were trying to promote. And so that led to formulation of things like the doctrine of the Trinity, right? So the Trinity came out of those early conflicts about who Jesus was and how do we explain Christ and the incarnation. And then later you had sort of entrenched errors that kind of build up in the church that led to sort of the Protestant Reformation and the Protestant emphasis on sola gratia and sola fide, the idea that salvation is a free gift of God. You don't earn it. It's given to you by faith, and it's through Jesus alone. So in the face of error, the church often responds with really good doctrine. And so now we have this era of evolution. And I feel like the church needs to be working on a really good response. I see a lot of people working on what to do with theology because evolution is true, right? So you've got theistic evolution side of things. And you've got a lot of people arguing that evolution must be false. But what is true if evolution is not, right? That's my question. Because here's the thing, the Trinity and the doctrine of free salvation by faith, those are more important than the errors. And I think we can all agree with that, right? I think we all see that. So, who remembers, especially now, 2,000 years later or 1,500 years later, who remembers what Arians were? I guess, some theology nerds probably know exactly who the Arians were, but the rest of us are like, I don't know what an Arian is. And yeah, but we know the Trinity. I think most people would be able to explain the Trinity if they've been in church for any length of time. So yeah, the truth matters. And I think that we need to be focused on that truth of creation. So those are kind of the motivations that led to the founding of Core Academy. I felt like I wanted to pass along this wisdom. I felt like we need to think more intentionally about generational leadership. I felt like the issue itself was just terribly important, and we needed to really think about it deeply and carefully, and more than just podcasts and popular articles. So yeah, there you go. So that's kind of my motivations.
And that last point that you made there, I think that's really important. There clearly is a place at times to refute error.
Yeah.
But if that's all that you do, you're kind of missing something important. It would be like kind of, if we structured our entire systematic theology around refuting the errors of Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, it might be important. It might be important to refute Jehovah's Witnesses, but if that's kind of how you structure your entire understanding of God, then something's sort of gone awry.
Yeah,
right? So,
exactly. Exactly.
We can't sort of neglect the deep sort of positive truths of Scripture and sort of contemplating those, and that's been part of the motivation, really. I know you spoke disparagingly about podcasts, but it's been part of the motivation of Let's Talk Creation as well, right? We want to sort of help people to think deeply about these topics that contribute to a positive understanding of creation. So I think that's all very very helpful. So are those all your personal motivations?
Yeah,
anything else that we?
There's probably more that I'm forgetting, but I think those are the important ones. I wanted to focus on reaching young people and teaching young people, specifically a body of learning about creation. I wanted to go deeper than your average creation outreach was going. I wanted to go really deep into the science and the theology, the really technical stuff. I wanted to pass along sort of generational competence and leadership, the collective learning for the next generation, and I wanted to focus on creation rather than just on evolution. So now I tried doing these things in the context of an existing Christian college for many years. 13 years I spent at a college doing that. And to be very honest with you, if the Lord hadn't pulled the rug out from under me, I'd probably still be there plugging away in that way. And I remember at the time thinking, this is the end of the world. They're eliminating my department. And I felt like it was a really terrible decision, but I tried to, not disparage people making these hard decisions, but I really felt like this is a bad idea and they're going to regret this. But looking back on it, I realized I was kind of complacent and I needed a divine kick in the seat to to get me moving on to better things. So in the traditional academic world, I had basically, as I said, grown complacent. I let other people do work that I really should have been doing myself. I felt like I was a traditional, I remember thinking as I came into that job, I am now an academic. My job is occasionally teaching classes. I'm going to do my research. I'm going to recruit students from the student body to help me doing my research and so forth. That's what I do. And I'm not going to do student recruitment. I'm not going to do promotional junk. I'm not going to do that stuff because that's not my calling. And that was just wrong. That was just really wrong. And so it made sense then that the Lord would sort of have to do something drastic to get my attention. So I started Core Academy after we were eliminated. I remember spending a brief amount of time on the long shot hope that some other Christian college might be interested in adopting us. We had some conversations with a couple of places, and then that just went nowhere. So off we went, and we started off with very little. The first couple years were extremely lean, but we're now, Core Academy is bigger than I could have ever imagined. We're working with more students than I could have ever recruited at that one institution. The students that we've recruited are more enthusiastic, mostly. I had a few really enthusiastic students in the 13 years, but not very many that I was in traditional academia. And then the support and financing has just exploded in ways that I don't think I ever would have been able to do had I remained in traditional academia. So, and we reach a much larger audience than through the outreach that we've developed here. So I think it was good. It was painful. I still look back and wince at a lot of the pain that it took to get it going. But at the same time, I'm grateful that the Lord has provided as much as he has. So,
yeah. I mean, I can remember when all of that happened, and it was a matter of great dismay to many of us. But yeah, I mean, looking back, I think what has happened is actually really exciting, and for the better of creationism. So although it was painful at the time, God was working his purposes out, I think. Okay, so that's interesting. But tell us, what exactly is it that you do at Core Academy? We've kind of talked about your sort of personal motivations, but what? That's kind of the big picture. But what do you actually do?
Right. Again, sorry, my brain goes to motives, and I get really excited about the big picture. God is at work, and I'm really excited about that. And yes, but what do we actually do? Okay, so our mission at Core Academy is to nurture the next generation of faithful, Christ-like creation researchers to explore the hardest problems in creation. Okay, how do we do that? We have sort of three main areas that we do our work. We focus on outreach, we focus on research, and we focus on mentoring. So, in the area of outreach, obviously we do the usual sorts of things that most ministries do. We make newsletters, and we post things on the internet, and we speak at churches and so forth. And thanks to our new, not new, she's been here 3 years now, our ministry manager, Anna McDonald, she came on board with this passion, absolute passion. We need to have more community outreach. And I said, sure. I said, yeah, okay, sure. That sounds good. So she's really spearheaded a lot of our local activities. We've done science camps for kids. We've done we've started a much more consistent program offering tours of our local, it's called Laurel State, the Laurel Snow State Natural Area, which is literally around the corner from our offices. And then whenever we have a special event like last year's Creation Together event, she's in the thick of that as well. So she's been really essential at expanding our local outreach. Another part of the outreach, so I've sort of said, as we noted, I said some disparaging things about podcasts. The only thing where I fault podcasts, there's a couple of things. One thing is that who are these people, and why do they say what they say? I think people have a tendency to just listen to people they like rather than think critically about what is being said. And so I kind of look with great suspicion at podcasts, because I think that guy's crazy. You shouldn't be listening to him. Or that woman doesn't know what she's talking about. That's nonsense. And the other thing about podcasts is there's not a lot of, there's a lot of meat to what's said in some of them. So you can't go look up ideas and find out more about them. So let's talk creation here, our podcast. Are we trustworthy and reliable? I have no idea. That's for the audience to judge. Do you like us? I guess some of you like us. That's, again, for the audience to judge. But we definitely have show notes to our episodes. So we do not want you to think that we're just making up stuff. We want you to be able to go and fact check what we're telling you, because I think that's terribly important. And honestly, it's been a pretty good success. We get thousands of views now. A typical episode will get at least 1,000 views or listens, and some of our more popular episodes will crack 2,000 or 3,000. Now, on the practical side, obviously, Paul and I share production of sort of the pre-production side of things, where we plan the episodes and we decide how we're going to, what order they're going to go in and what comes next and all that stuff. We research what we're going to talk about. And then we write out either sort of a kind of a script. I say script, it's, we wing it, but it's still, there's notes. And then we record it. But then after that, Core Academy does the post-production work on that. So Anna does the editing. My wife, Stephanie, does the show notes and the website. And then Anna makes all those little clips that you see on your social media. If you follow us on social media, you might see a clip or two. That's Anna's work that's happening there. So that's all outreach. And I do want to just plug a little bit more there. Some of our best episodes, I think, are some of the least popular. So you can go to YouTube and you can click on our videos, and then you can sort by popularity. And you can skip all the way to the bottom of that list, and you'll find some really interesting episodes. You should do that because some of them are just not that popular, which I find sad, but they're very interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, one of the things about the podcast is it always surprises us which episodes kind of take off.
Yeah. Yes.
And people really enjoy, and which episodes sort of languish a bit. And actually, some of the episodes we're most excited about sort of have been ones that have languished a bit.
Yes.
And, so you should definitely do that. Sort by popularity and go to the least popular and check out some of those episodes, because I think you'll be surprised.
Yeah.
Let's Talk Creation has become a very significant part of our ministry, I think, in Biblical Creation Trust as well. As you say, Core Academy, Anna does all the post-production. But we do invest a lot of time sort of planning out these episodes and sort of scripting them out and so on and recording them. And it has been, I think, really rewarding to see the appreciative feedback we've had from viewers and listeners. It's always very gratifying to me that people want to come and tune in to us waffling on, that people find something of benefit in that. It's been great to see the audience grow. That's been fantastic. I would love to reach more. I think there's room for even more growth, and I'm sure our listeners can help with that as they sort of share the podcast and recommend us to others. But even now, we reach far more through this podcast, far more people every couple of weeks than we could possibly reach in other ways.
That's right.
I speak in churches and so on. And valuable though that sort of face-to-face ministry is, I'd have to visit a lot of churches to reach the audience we reach with this podcast.
That's right.
And the other thing I'd say about it is we now have this tremendous resources archive of well over 100 episodes on all kinds of topics, and that's a great resource, because now I often find myself drawing on it, so that when people come to me with questions about specific sort of parts of the creationist model or what have you, very often I can point people to an episode. I can say, we've done an episode of the podcast about that, so go and check that out. So that's a great resource. Okay, so that's your sort of outreach activities. What about your research? Because I know that's very dear to your heart. What have you got sort of going on there at the moment?
Yeah, so one of the first things we've got, and I think one of our most important activities, is the library and archives at Core Academy. So we've put together just a massive collection, thousands of books. We've got papers, we've got ephemera, we've got photography, we've got artifacts, all concerning basically the broader theme of Christianity and science, sort of Christianity dealing with sort of secular learning about the world, but more specifically, of course, about the creation evolution debate. We've got our earliest published work is from 1495. Wow. And if you know your book collecting, that's something called incunable, which means it's within the first 50 years of the printed book being invented. And then through reprints, we've got materials that go all the way back to basically the founding of the church in the 2nd century. The archives then preserve papers from notable creationists like Wayne Frair or Frank Marsh or Byron Nelson. And if you don't know those guys, you should Google them, because they're important. They're important guys. You should learn about that. We have a collection of Scopes trial, photography and writing and memorabilia. We also have another collection of memorabilia on Inherit the Wind, the sort of distorted movie version history of that trial. So we've got a lot of stuff, and it's really quite an extraordinary collection. And I enjoy showing it off. So if you ever want to come by the offices, I'd love to be able to show you what we got.
No, I love a good library, and I always enjoy it when I'm there in Core Academy and I can sort of browse everything you've got there. Those rare materials sound really expensive. Have you had to spend a lot of money to get some of those?
Well, you'd be surprised. Let's just put it that way. I am always very conscious of sort of the sacred nature of donations. I don't want to be wasting people's money. If they're giving to God through us, then I'm going to be accountable for waste and spending and so forth. So we've always had a library acquisition budget. This year it's less than 5% of the budget, so it's not that much. And yes, there are lots of things that I've seen for sale that I wanted, but were thousands of dollars, and I just had to let them go because I cannot, in good conscience, spend donor money on that particular item. But I'm always looking for a good bargain. So how do we end up with an incunable? That was an accident. I don't think the dealer realized it was incunable. I think he thought it was 17th century, and so we were quite shocked when it came. And I thought, this looks way too different from what I've seen published in the 17th century. But anyway, but the thing about the library is, so if you think about this, in our modern world, sort of creation is one of those ideas that's been tossed out on the scrap heap, essentially. It's like believing that the Earth is the center of the solar system and the sun orbits the Earth. This is just old stuff. It's not important. And nobody's really taking care of that, right? Now, I know BCT has a bit of a library, so I don't want to say that nobody's doing this. There are people out there who are very interested in collecting works on creation. But if we don't do it, we, broadly speaking, don't collect our own history and wisdom and learning about creation, then no one else is going to do it.
Yeah.
So that to me is a major motivation. And on the research side, then it's available to researchers who want to come use it. That's no problem. We will let you, look through the books and study whatever you want to study. But it also supports pretty much everything that we do. It's almost hard to imagine a week going by that I don't go out into the library and get something out. It supports in a very big way the work that we do here on Let's Talk Creation. If you've ever listened to a podcast episode with the two of us, just me and Paul, talking about some really interesting topic, and you say, wow, I've never heard that before, it's probably because we got that out of the library. Either the Core Academy library or Paul's library, but both of them support the work that we're doing here. So one of the reasons why this podcast ends up being so popular and so interesting to people, I think, is because we have this massive repository of information and wisdom available to us that we can call on and then turn that into something compelling and helpful. And I just feel like this library is in essence sort of the shoulders of the giants on which we stand in order to reach the next big height, right? That's kind of the thing that people say about their achievements. And yeah, that's exactly what our library is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned there BCT's library, because we share much the same vision as Core Academy and Biblical Creation Trust. So we've been working hard to build a library. Perhaps it's not as impressive at the moment as Core Academy's library, but it's still quite a large collection. The core of it is my own sort of personal collection of books that I've acquired over many years, and then it's supplemented by sort of acquisitions from a small budget that BCT gives me for books and journals and so on. And like you say, I mean, it's important for our own research. I use it all the time. You can see part of it behind me.
Yeah.
This is just a very small part of it here. But I'm surrounded by it here and another room, and I've got a storage unit with even more stuff. But what we'd really like in the long run is to make this library more readily accessible to other people, to other scholars. There's nothing like the serendipity in research of browsing through the library. And
yes.
yeah. So
you can't beat it.
It's really important. You can't beat it.
No, Google will never be able to replace just looking at titles on a shelf and going, oh, that looks like a perfect book that I've been looking for.
Yeah. Or I never knew that existed.
Yes.
There it is. And it's important, as you say, as a historical archive. And one thing, actually, I mean, if there are any sort of older listeners who've been involved in the creation movement for a very long time, and you've got your own sort of personal archive of whatever it is, books, pamphlets, promotional materials, unpublished documents, correspondence, whatever it is, if you've got materials which are of importance to the history of our movement, the creation movement, and you may not even think perhaps it's terribly important, and you're thinking, what am I going to do with all of this? Where is this going to go when I'm no longer around? What's going to happen to all of this? Please contact us, because Todd and I are really interested in sort of preserving that history and building up an archive, because I think it's really important that we document all of that. So yeah, anyway, enough of that. Todd, one other thing, I know you work on actual original research, so tell us about that. What can you tell us about projects that you've kind of worked on or you've got going on at the moment?
Right. So at Core Academy, the mission is to nurture faithful Christ-like creation researchers to explore the hardest problems in creation. So by hard problems, what we mean is a problem that is going to take sustained effort to resolve. That is not going to be, there's not an obvious solution. There's not an obvious solution on the horizon. But through long-term effort, we can actually start to answer those kinds of questions. So I want to emphasize that, because at Core Academy, we're not really trying to feed you particular answers. This is the creationist answer to question number one. I'm more interested in sparking your imagination about what answers would be consistent with creationism and biblical doctrines, and how can we start exploring those kinds of answers. So my own original research sort of serves three purposes. One purpose, obviously, is the podcast. So some episodes we actually can't just write it off the top of our heads. We have to actually do some reading and studying and figure out, what is it we're going to say about this topic. So there's research that feeds into that. Also, the books that I'm working on. So as we've mentioned before on the podcast, we have a pretty big book that Paul and I are working together on regarding the creation model. So that's happening, and I'm doing an enormous amount of research for that. And Paul, I know you are also doing an enormous amount of research. This is going to be really different, and I'm really kind of getting excited about it. I know both of us completed some pretty big sections of it this spring, and it's been a long time as we've worked on it, and it's turning into years. But it's so, I think, kind of groundbreaking that it's going to be really kind of I hope, a generational book that's going to sort of set out a research agenda for the next generation. And then, of course, the research that I work on, I'm interested in questions about sort of the material record of human origins and human history. So I'm interested in hominin fossils. I'm interested in sort of the interface between earliest sort of Stone Age archaeology and sort of biblical archaeology, that kind of thing. I'm interested in natural evil. I'm interested in created kinds. And I'm interested in what I'm sort of starting to call the fusion of science and faith. I think fusion's a really nice word to capture the idea of sort of the intimate connecting of these sort of two areas of learning. How do they work together? And that's a subject that I'm very interested in.
Yeah, that's very good. And I will kind of say we are all quite excited about that book you're writing on human origins.
Ah, yes, that one. Yes.
So So we're excited about the big sort of creation model book we're doing, but actually that human origins book, that's going to
Yes.
be very significant too.
There is another. Yes, there is another book on human origins. I've mentioned it from time to time over the years.
Yeah.
Probably a good 10 to 15 years now that I've talked about. I need to sit down and write this book. I have written outlines. I once wrote an outline that went 100 pages of what I wanted this book to be, and I just felt like there were still questions that I wanted to answer before I wrote it down. But the good news is that now I have a publisher interested in it. I have an editor interested in it. So I am actually in the initial planning stages of actually making that book a reality. So it is no longer going to be that thing Todd keeps talking about that he never gets around to. It's going to see the light of day someday. And again, as you might expect, I promise you, you've never read anything like it. It's not going to be the usual creationist fossil expose book. It's not going to be sort of a typical creationist genomics expose. It's not going to be, it's going to be really, really unique. And I hope that people can get excited about it. But yes, it's happening. Yeah. I'm sorry that it took so long, but it's happening.
That's great. No, we're looking forward to that. The last area of your work that we haven't talked about, I guess, is mentoring. You mentioned that earlier on. So tell us about your mentoring program there at Core Academy.
Right. So I think research blends right into that because my research interests are very interesting and I think useful, but I've gotten to the point now where I'm not really interested in doing a lot of that if I don't have someone assisting me, if I don't have a sort of a practical, sort of a generational mentoring component to the research, I kind of leave it alone. So yeah, I do research work that involves students broadly conceived. Sometimes they're finished with school and young, and sometimes they're still in school. Sometimes they're very young. It just depends on the student and how dedicated they are and talented they are. So that's part of our mentoring work, is that I work directly with students on creation research projects, trying to pass along to them some practical skills as well as sort of bigger picture about how to think about research problems as a creationist, and how to read things and how to interpret things well, right? And read things in terms, read the data, how to understand the data, how not to over-interpret the data. It's very easy for us to get caught up in sort of confirmation bias. I think we really need to be very careful in avoiding that kind of thing. And so, that's part of what we do there. The other big way that we do mentoring is through the Sanders Scholarship Program. So the Sanders Program is named after Roger Sanders, who was our co-founder at Core Academy. He passed away in 2018. And so we started this fund in his honor. Every year we raise money and we award a scholarship to a student working on a mentoring project with another sort of established researcher. Sometimes the money is used for research expenses. Sometimes the money is used for paying the student to work on the project. Just depends. There have been a number of different Sanders Scholars over the years, and we've raised and awarded more than $30,000 for specifically mentoring young students in creation research. So that's a way that we can extend our work beyond just what I am personally able to do. And we are always on the lookout for funding and donations to help us support that program. So if you'd like to know more, you can visit coresci.org/Sanders to find out more about the Sanders Fund.
Yeah, definitely. If there are people out there that want to contribute to that fund and help support young students getting started in creationism, that would be absolutely brilliant. And also students and professors, who are interested maybe in sort of drawing on that fund, they should definitely go and check it out. So do go and have a look at the website. Todd, plans for the future. Talk about those. What plans do you have?
Yeah, so for the immediate future, we have the Smoky Mountain Creation Retreat. This is another one of this is kind of a thing that sort of crosses the boundary between outreach and mentoring. It's a weekend in the Smokies where we bring in a special guest to sort of talk us through a subject of interest to creationism. In the spring, we had Matt McLean visit us, and we talked about some very weird fossils from South Africa and other parts of the world. So that was really excellent, surprisingly excellent, I thought, considering the weird subject matter. And then this fall, I will be leading us as we talk about the fall and how we can think about the fall changing creation, or whether we should think about the fall changing creation. So that'll be the first weekend of October. People can find out more about that at coresci.org/Smokies. Although I will tell you, if you're interested, you best get your tickets now because they tend to sell out. I can't remember the last time we did not sell out a Smoky Mountain Creation Retreat. So yes, don't make us turn you away. Get your tickets quickly if you're interested in coming. Now, in the future, also, the sort of longer range future, I'm really getting a burden, and I think people are also thinking about this as well, to sort of expand our sort of education, training, mentoring, outreach beyond just what we're doing now. I can only do so much. The Sanders Fund is a really small thing. The past couple of years, we've only been able to support one student each year. So that's been somewhat disappointing. I've been wanting to do more. So, I want to expand that program. And we have some very specific plans in mind of how to do that. I'm kind of interested in thinking about formal short courses. I'm kind of interested in thinking about how we make these things count for more than just a weekend getaway. How, for example, we might offer credit for a student who is interested in studying a particular topic. So that would be an expanded kind of a short course rather than just a retreat. So, and I think, I think things are coming together where that might be possible in the very near future. The Lord is raising up some very interesting supporters. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to ruin any relationships we're developing. But there are some very interesting folks coming out who have just decided, hey, I want to really support what you're doing, and they're giving some substantial amounts of money, which is really incredibly blessing, incredibly encouraging. And know now, if you have given us a substantial gift, we are absolutely working on ways of expanding the work that we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. You talked there about sort of short courses and giving students credits and that kind of thing. I mean, it sounds like you want to be a school. Is that right? Is that the long-term goal?
I've always said Core Academy of Science is not a school. And maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know that we want to be a formal school, like, registered with the government to offer degrees or whatever. That's a very expensive and time-consuming thing. But we definitely, I think, practically speaking, we want to get into the arena of offering more formal training, either for students who are interested in creation science or for other people who might be interested in more theological subjects. So one of the things that we're talking about here in the future is a kind of a retreat that would be specially designed for Christian pastors and ministers. So we would hold it, instead of on the weekend, we would hold it in the middle of the week. And we would focus on a subject that's more deliberately designed for the Christian minister, to think about how to help people understand the importance and value of creation beyond just why evolution is wrong, right? To help them rediscover, in a sense, the value and the meaning of the Christian doctrine of creation. So that's something that's been suggested to us. I'm very excited about the idea. We need to know if there's an audience. So if you're out there in our audience land and you're hearing this idea and you are a pastor, or you have a pastor, or you know someone else in regular Christian ministry, a youth pastor, a music minister, whatever, and you think that person would be a great addition to a minister's retreat, hey, drop us a line, podcast@coresci.org, or visit us on our social media, send us a message, whatever. We'd like to hear from you, because if there is demand for a minister's retreat, we want to make it happen. We're going to try to make it happen anyway. But it would be really good to know that there's an audience. So watch for maybe an announcement about that this fall, as we start to think about our 2026 calendar.
That sounds really great. And again, that's one of the emphases that we have in Biblical Creation Trust, that we have so many things in common with one another. We're thinking about ways to help the church sort of integrate their understanding of creation into the whole ministry and life of the church.
Yes.
To understand this is just normal Christian theology. It's not just some niche apologetic issue.
Right.
It's not just about refuting evolutionary arguments. Actually, this is really important for Christian theology.
Mm-hmm.
And my colleague Stephen, he's used the slogan "Make creationism normal again." We haven't kind of released red baseball caps with that on.
Oh, thank you.
But there we are. Anything else you want to add, Todd, before we close this episode?
Just a gigantic thank you. None of this could be possible without the prayer, encouragement, and financial support that we've gotten from hundreds of people over the years. It still sort of blows my mind how far we've come, how much we've grown. And it's all thanks to, God putting our ministry on the hearts of so many people. We couldn't do this without all of you. And of course, I have to remind you, we would love your support. You can visit coresci.org/donate to make your contribution. Don't think you've got to make a big contribution. Lots of people just give us $5 or $10. There's no shame in that. God takes that money and puts it together with so many other donations, and it becomes this big, wonderful, beautiful thing. And so don't feel like, oh, my whatever is not good enough. It's always good enough. What you give to God is great, and you should. And then if you would like to talk about bigger gifts, what we're doing, maybe you want to sponsor our pastor's retreat. Maybe you'd like to sponsor other activities that we're doing. Maybe you'd like to sponsor a Sanders Scholarship. We would love to chat with you about that. If you'd like to know how best to make your contribution, you can email us. You can email us directly at podcast@coresci.org. We will get that email, and we will get in touch with you about whatever it is that you have in mind, whatever your vision is, and how that might connect with what we're doing at Core Academy. But yeah, thank you so much. Thanks to the Lord as well for the wonderful things that he's doing in our work, and for wherever he's leading us next. We're pretty excited. We see so much really interesting and wonderful things happening behind the scenes, growth happening that's just really startling. And thank you so much for that. So a note of gratitude. That's where we're going to end.
That was great. I've learned a lot about the ministry of Core Academy today, and I'm sure that our listeners and viewers have as well. We'll have to do this again. We're going to have you back on the podcast.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I could probably work that into my schedule.
Anyway, that's going to have to be the last word, because we've kind of run out of time. But that was great, and I'm sure our listeners will have enjoyed that episode. We hope that you'll join us in 2 weeks' time for another episode. Not sure what's coming up, but we'll see you in a couple of weeks. We'll see you then.
All right. See you then.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Creation. For more information, visit us at letstalkcreation.org, where you'll find an archive of past episodes and all our show notes. If you'd like to leave a comment or make a suggestion, you can find us on all the major social media platforms. Let's Talk Creation is brought to you in the U.S. by Core Academy of Science and in the U.K. by Biblical Creation Trust. As a listener-supported ministry, we are grateful for all of your financial support. Find out how you can make a contribution at our website, letstalkcreation.org. Also remember to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. Thanks, and see you next time.